Yay! Amazingly live. Amazing. Trying to make a live video here for like a couple of days, but I couldn't connect. The other night I did a video, it was like an hour long, explaining all kinds of intricate things, and it didn't record. We had like the first winter storm going through, and I guess it caused some kind of breach of the internet, so we didn't have anything going on at that time, unfortunately. So, I had been talking with a friend of mine about this concept of Shakti's ring. And I explained the concept to him a bit. And then the other night, that great, amazing explanation. And it's kind of like a teaching concept, which I think is quite useful. It's more than useful. I guess what I should start off with, hey, vegan dolls, I should start off with the idea that I was watching a video. There's a cool channel on YouTube called Esoterica. And the other day on Esoterica, the very good host, who's like a doctor of religion or something, but he basically is focused on the occult, and he had a couple of like big shots in for a chat. There was like 4 people having a chat about evoking spirits, and I thought this would be really interesting because I've got quite a bit of experience with that, and so I thought it'd be really interesting to listen to this. And one of the guys is this guy, Dr. Stephen Skinner, who's I guess he's quite well known. He's quite well known in the community, I guess. I've probably read some of his books, but it's been such a long time. I downloaded one the other day to like have a look at it quickly to see what he's saying. But I was kind of astonished at some of the things that were said at in the meeting. And there's like a divide, and I don't want to push myself too strongly here because you don't know everything about everybody's stuff. And Skinner in particular, and they were all really knowledgeable people, more knowledgeable than I am, like academically. But he said some things I was just like, what? And things which tie into this idea, which I want to discuss. And I think this video is supposed to be called Shakti's Ring, but I don't know if it ever actually happened to actually get named that. So in the video with Esoterica, they were talking a lot about magical circles and the drawing of magical circles. And, I've seen that kind of stuff before. And and you wonder, what's the best way to do it? And they had mentioned that using a knife or a sword is a great way of drawing a magical circle in the air. But Skinner's like really done a lot of evocation. Like he's written a lot of books. He certainly knows a lot about it. But he said a couple of things. I was like, what? So what he said was at one point they were saying to him, well, they were saying, why do we use circles? Why do we use a magical circle? Why isn't it like a magical square or a magical oblong, right? Why is it a circle? And so he's like, well, and he gets into a whole bunch of like details, and he stops and he's like, wait a minute. He's like, you know what? He's like, I actually don't know why it's a circle. He's like, I mean, there's a lot of like historical reasons for it. He's like, I don't know why it's a circle. Honest, right? And he's got a very, very developed way of doing his circles, right? It's very, very developed circle philosophy here. But I thought that was rather strange. And then another thing he said, which I was like, what? Was like he mentioned that he doesn't think. He basically says the imagination plays no role in evocation, none, or magic. What? Like I'm blown away by that. So, however, I think it can happen that way potentially, just based on some of the stuff I've seen with some of those are transmissions by Sifu Mark Rasmus, which are very physically based. And so when this guy Stephen Skinner was talking, he was talking about very meticulously drawing magical circles. And they said to him, well, how do you know if you've had success? He's like, well, sometimes there's like atmospheric disturbance. He's like, one time it was crazy. He mentioned one time he's like, we were in a castle. There's a group of us and we're in a castle, an abandoned castle, spooky. And he's like, we start evoking spirits. And all of a sudden there was this incredible noise coming down the chimney. And he's like all of a sudden we're surrounded by noise. And it was like birds had come down the chimney. And then at the end, they all went back up the chimney. He's like, what are the chances of 100 birds coming down the chimney? He's like, obviously the spirits must have moved them down. And then they went off. And he's like, you know what happened the next day? He's like, do you know what we found on the floor? Bird poop. So is that a sign of an evocation? It may well be a sign of an evocation, right? But I don't know, man. I mean, to me, it sort of strikes me that maybe, yeah. I mean, I'm not going to denigrate anybody else. It just doesn't seem like an evocation to me. But he's got way more experience than I've done. He's also got balls. I mean, the guy's like evoked all the scary spirits. You know, he's done the Solomons and the Goetia and all this stuff, which, you know, I wouldn't do that stuff probably, you know. But yeah, so that was interesting. But let's come back just a little bit here to the point he was making about, I don't know why there's a magical circle. Funnily enough, I meditate on circular structures quite a bit. And so I feel like maybe I've got a little bit of insight into this, right? Maybe. Also, you know, like I think I mentioned this in one of the chat or one of the community comments. I've been having a chat lately with this girl, Marie Lindstrom, who's got this website called Flowing Grace, and she's got a YouTube called Flowing Grace too. And she's like an initiated Kundalini master. She's been like initiated to do transmissions, like from a lineage. And I had a transmission from her like just over a year ago or 2 years ago. And, you know, it wasn't presential, you know, it was just like online. And we didn't even chat. It was just like at this hour it will happen. So I thought maybe I felt something, but not much, you know. But Marie Lindstrom, yeah. With an umlaut over the O, but I think you can just look that up. If you look up Flowing Grace, Marie Lindstrom will come up on YouTube. So it was interesting because she was part of another group, which was called Advaita Ashram, which had like they had a Facebook group and they had a website. That's where I got the contact for the transmission. And I just got like a vibe from them, like it felt authentic. And then I think there was some personal troubles there. Like I think she split. I think her boyfriend was like the guru, basically. I may be wrong about that. I'm just sort of extrapolating. And I think they split. And now she's doing things herself. Anyway, I was on her. I sort of rediscovered because she came back on recently. I started YouTube. I'm like, oh. So here's the funny thing is like I went onto her YouTube and I was watching one of her videos. I thought I'd just watch this video, you know, it was about the ego. And I start watching it and I'm watching it. And all of a sudden, and if you've watched my old videos, you may remember this kind of thing happening in the past. But I was watching her and all of a sudden it was just something out of her lip, at the side of her lip. I'm like, and then boom, massive transmission. Unfucking believable transmission from her. And it was so intense that I went into like kriyas and like yoga shapes and I started like jumping around the house, you know. I was like, there's so much energy. It was like crazy. My son comes out of the bedroom. He's like, Dad, he's like, what's going on? I'm like, so like, oh no. And I had to turn the video off. It was like so nutty. And then I watched a couple more videos of it. I mean, that took me like that was with me the whole day. That was crazy. And then like over the next few days, I'm like, dude, that was insane. And I went back. I thought I'll just check on that. Maybe have a look at another video. So, so I went back and whoa, different videos, different effects, you know. And I was like, man, I don't know about this, dude, you know. But I had one experience where I was really tired. I went to bed one night, and I thought I'll just try watching one of her videos before bed, you know, and see if I can see if there's a vibe, you know. But I'm like really tired, so I'm looking at the video, and I was not off, right? Anyway, I wake up a couple of seconds or minutes later, and like I'm surrounded in white light, right? I'm like, what? And then I can hear her talking. I'm like, oh yeah, I'm listening to this video, you know, and just unbelievable transmission just coming off of this audio. And there's a thing with the there's a thing with Kundalini. I mean, I don't know how you explain it. There's like it's almost like a network of intelligence coming off it. So I watched a few, and I kind of like talked myself down a little bit, so I can watch them now without. Well, I haven't had a big transmission on that in a while, you know, so that's cool. But the main thing about this, because I was talking about the Shakti's ring, but the interesting thing about that is, I ended up chatting with her a little bit, and she was like, but what I like about her is she's got this style of teaching, right? Which is kind of meditative, right? So she'll come on for 15 minutes and just a little meditation, the end, which is quite cool. Whereas I come on, I'll talk for an hour, right? Maybe you'll learn something, maybe you won't, right? So I was thinking that's like, it's like a better format. I was like, I should do that because I mean, I'm always talking about meditation, but I never share meditations with you people, right? Which is not fair, you know. But but no. Although you know the thing is, vegan dolls is I think there's an element of there's an element of there's an element in transmissions which is related to that, I think, you know. For example, I think I think that transmissions, like for example, with the transmission from Julian, which I had all those years ago, that's like that transmission came through like the field of friendship, right? I think it's not necessary for a lot of people, you know. I mean, like some people, like Chris Mitchell, just talk to them, and you get fried by transmissions. But I think it can often be it's what it is connecting to some kind of pure field, and that field becomes the medium of transmission, right? Anyway, her field is kind of like a simple dialogue, or no, simple sort of meditative dialogue, right? Anyway, the reason I bring this up is because the Shakti's ring, right? So I've been doing these meditations. I got all these different meditations I do. Depends. Like if I'm really tired, I do certain kinds of meditations because like you wake up at 4 a.m. and you can't sleep, but you can't stay awake. So how do you put energy into it? This kind of thing. But generally, back in the day, I started my meditational journey using this sort of nidra yoga technique, or it's almost vipassana technique, where it's kind of like a body awareness meditation, right? And so one of the things I would do is I would allow my awareness to sit in a point, right? So like, for example, if I'm doing it with my hand, I might do, okay, I'm putting my awareness at the tip of the finger here, then the tip of the finger, tip of the finger, tip of the finger. Now, there was a time where I could spend 2 hours just on the hand. And so then I'd go to the next joint, next joint, next joint. Then I would examine the space around the hand, which sounds boring, but when you can feel energy, it just becomes just like, it becomes just like overwhelming, unbelievable, ecstatic thing to do is just examining the space of consciousness around your fingers, right? But one of the interesting things that can happen is that what I'm talking about here is you're talking about a point. So let's just look at one point. Let's just say this point at the top of my finger would be one of the points. Boom. And so there's two things that's happening. One is there's the point which exists in my finger, somewhere in the middle of the finger. Then there's also the conscious intention, right, of connecting with that point. So there's almost like there's two sort of modes of awareness maybe coming to a point right here, right? Which is cool. It's just a point in space. Now, one of the things about points in space is now this is a point in consciousness. It's not really a point in space, but by analogy, if it was a point in space, it's one-dimensional, right? It's just a one-dimensional or almost zero-dimensional thing. It's just sitting there somewhere, right? And but it's energetic. I can feel energy emerging from the finger. And so if there's energy emerging from the finger, how is that emerging? Well, it's emerging like as a sphere or as a circle, right? So energy emerges from the void, because the point represents the void. What was it Bardon said about Archimedes? I'll just keep going. I don't want to get carried away. But the point is, let's imagine, see a point from which energy is emitting or emerging. Maybe it's not emitting, it's just emerging as a circle. And so what happens is that circle is what I would call the first imaginative projection. The first imaginative projection of from the void, right? I would actually call it more than that, but I'll get to that in a second. So what you've got is you've got like a ring of energy around your finger now, right? And it's not very well developed. I mean, right now I'm just pretending it's there, right? Really, it's just something I came up with one day, right? But what you can do is you can start cultivating this imaginative structure. It's an imaginative object, right? This is a telephone. It's not an imaginative structure, but it emerged from somebody's imagination. But by cultivating the imagination, they produced it. What we're doing is we've got a ring, and we're going to cultivate the ring. There's 100 ways you could do this. One way is you might just start sliding your awareness around the ring. How big is the ring for you? Right? It might be a very small ring around like the bone. That might be bigger, coming like right around here. In which direction does it move? Right? Is it light? What color is it? So by interrogating the imaginative object, it gives us a way of connecting to what that object is. Now, right now, it's a slightly stimulated imaginative. Yeah. Well, that comes up. It does come up, and I appreciate the irony. But this does mean something, even though it seems stupid. It means something. Yeah. And so, what you can do is, in a way, what you end up doing is you can almost polish the imaginative object with your consciousness. Now, what would happen if that imaginative object, the ring, was made of light, for example, right? And so as you move your consciousness around the ring, you're actually revealing more of the brilliance of it coming out of it. What happens is, well, maybe the idea of light doesn't appeal to you. Maybe it's a golden ring, right? It's a golden ring with beautiful Sanskrit text written upon it, for example. And that's a Sanskrit text written around the ring is a sort of interesting anchor for the mind, right? Because then the mind's like, oh, why is there Sanskrit on this ring, right? And it doesn't really matter. What's important is that you're, by creating sort of visual anchors, you're creating a sort of a magnetic object, because the mind will become magnetized to the object, right? Lots of ways you could do this. Other ways you can do this, right, is you can think of other kinds of rings. Now, the idea here is, before I go into other types of rings, is the idea here is that if you have a specific, no, if you've got a specific, I'm going to explain why. If you've got if you can energize the ring so that it becomes cultivated and it really attracts your attention, what's happening actually is you're actually condensing the imagination into the astral plane. See, by default, imagination is like RAM or RAM. It's like RAM in your computer. It's there, it goes away. It's there, it goes away. It's there, it goes away. If you want to save something, you promote it onto the hard disk, right? If you want to keep it. And the same kind of thing happens with the imaginative objects, is when you cultivate the imaginative objects into something which is very stimulating to you, to your mind, and attracts the attention of the mind, that allows this imaginative object to get pushed, or I like to say promoted. It's like a 3D word, promoted into the astral plane, where it can gain a more permanent life. So there's a bunch of interesting ways of thinking about this. Somebody recommended a book to me in the last month or two called Fire. What the hell was it called? Let me just have a quick look. It's a book on Vajrayana Tantra, and it's called Inner Fire. Let me just have a quick look. I've got my huge list of books here, which I haven't actually read in a while. I sort of got led astray here. Inner Fire. It's called Inner Fire. And it's a kind of interesting book because it has a whole pathway for working with Vajrayana concepts, but it has a couple of key concepts there. And some of the key concepts are a white dot and a red dot. And the white dot and the red dot are discussed in a lot of different tantric traditions, Shaiva, Vajrayana, whatever. The white dot emerges. What you do is there's a visualization in Vajrayana where you visualize Vajrasattva, one of the gurus, having sex with his consort above your crown chakra. Now, when they're having sex, liquid starts flowing down from them into your crown chakra and down into your root chakra, forming a little white drop. I'm just telling you what it is. So I've been talking about this. I've been talking about using sexual metaphors for like meditative objects for some time. Well, this is the thing. Vegan Dolls here in the chat is saying, "What? Hard no, right? Yeah, I get it, right? But what's funny about that is that actually would be a good. It would probably be a good meditative object because it creates such a fiery response in consciousness, right? It creates a visceral, right? And it's an interesting mechanic in consciousness. And so there's a bunch of sort of stages of that kind of thing you might think about. So that's obviously one way of thinking about it, right? So one way of thinking about it. So imagine if that point in my finger was the white point, right? There's also a red point, and is that blood, right? But there's like different. It's just white and red, and then there's also Tibetan syllables, much like the Indian tantra where you place Sanskrit syllables in your body. There's Tibetan syllables you plant, and so you can focus on those. And so in the Inner Fire, and then I've been studying the Vajrayana here, but there's a practice of what you do is you breathe through the Ida and Pingala. They got a different name in Tibetan. But if you breathe through Ida and Pingala, and then you exhale into the white syllable in the root chakra, And as you do this, it generates heat, and the heat is what blows Kundalini up through the system. But it's quite a mechanical way they explain this. It's like, okay, you bring it up, and now you pull it up, and it's almost like it's almost like a prescriptive approach to it. So what they're doing when they're doing this, it's almost like you're pulling the energy. It's almost like you're working. We got to get this friggin' energy up. You got to push, breathe, push, right? And I'm not sure it's the best way to do it. And that's a good point. Well, what's interesting, and I'll get to this too, Vegan Dolls, is you're saying it'd be better just to garden. And that's very much the approach that, well, at some level, that Marie Lindstrom does. She's got this approach of like, whereas I'm saying focus, like push the imaginative object into the astral. She'll do something like, well, you focus on like a joyful feeling, and you can cultivate a joyful feeling and push that into the astral too, right? I mean, so there's a whole bunch of different ways of approaching it. The main thing is cultivating a field of energy, whatever field works for you. But in Tantra, like it's obviously got ideas, concepts of using sexual energy. There's other energies too. There's a great one. That last transmission I did from the Lama here. Dude, what was that? I can't remember what it was. It was crazy. It was like cannibalistic like stuff, like crazy visualizations, which sounds like, dude, I don't want to be involved in that stuff. But what it's about, it's about breaking down the no way barriers, right? It's about using the energy of these visceral reactions as the fuel for awakening. So so one way of thinking about that was the white dot is obviously this fluid coming down. But I mean, there's other ways of doing this, because there's a whole bunch of different ways of thinking about sexual energy, right? That one's, I mean, it's not even that specific, because people don't really talk about it that much. Like you'll read about it and then you'll be like, what? But then if you look at any of the transmissions or the empowerments, they'll just say focus on a white dot. Nobody explains what you're doing. Well, some people do, but often it's not discussed, right? Which I think is a disservice, to be honest with you. I think it should be discussed, because the visceral energy of that thing is what is the power, and it's what creates the magnetism of the mind, because the magnetism and the perfect laser-like conscious focus is what changes reality. So what other kinds of rings? You might imagine a ring around your wrist, because I mean, obviously there's a circumference there, right? There's a circumference there. Maybe around here, there's a circumference. Around the neck, there's a circumference. If you were thinking about the Vajrasattva with his consort, obviously there's some kind of penetration occurring, right? So the point of contact between them could also be a ring, right? So at that point, you're not being, I mean, you're kind of being specific, right? But what would happen if, maybe you don't think about Vajrasattva, maybe you think about your own life and that ring of intimacy, if you want to call it that. There's a ring of intimacy between you and your lover, between Vajrasattva with his consort. But then you remove it from that situation, right? So now maybe I'm thinking about that ring of intimacy and it's around my finger. So I've changed the context, but it's still got the tint, right? It's still got the tint of its origin, right? So there's still this tint of the sexual energy, right? And so what happens often is the sexual energy is more powerful than the breath, right? So a lot of these people are doing all this like Wim Hof breathing into their root chakra, hoping something happens, and it may not happen. And they're pulling out of the pool. But the way that energy should be moved, in my opinion, is there's no struggle, right? The way you move Kundalini is the same way you it's the same way you seduce a woman, right? It's done with playful skill rather than huffing and puffing and blow your house in, right? It's just much easier. It's a more artful way of doing it. So if you're huffing and puffing and trying to move energy and blowing energy into the root chakra, that can work. But I don't think it's really intuitive. And it's not something we've practiced all of our life. Whereas I think most people have highly developed senses of sensuality, which they hide from everybody in regular life. But if you're working inside of the bounds of the symbolic nomenclature of the Shakti's ring, then it becomes an interesting proposition. So obviously what I'm saying here, I guess, is that the origin of magic circles is from the first projection of the astral plane. The first projection of the astral plane I propose is the projection of energy from the point of focus, right? And so what the magical circle, well, nobody knows where it comes from, but they've written about it. It's from the locus. I like to use fancy words here, people. It's from the focus point of pure consciousness. And where it meets the void, and that expansion of energy is the magical circle. Now, the truth is, most people are not at that level of consciousness. They can even observe that happening. So obviously, in that case, you're just like, okay, draw the circle, man. Right? Don't know what it means. It seems to work anyway. Even if you don't know what it means, it seems to work. So that's cool. A lot of this stuff seems to work by analogy. But if you can engage the mind at a high level and create this magnetic focus, you no longer have to read about it. You can observe it happening, right? So what happens is as you, here's an interesting thing too, is Kundalini spirals up the spine, they tell you. How that might happen. I'm saying it moves in circles. But what is the relationship? Well, I mean, this is just kind of an extrapolation here. This is probably not spiritually true, but for me, it's interesting that the relationship between a circle and a spiral, very similar. You get a circle, and then you get a spiral. All a spiral is a circle extrapolated through time, right? So if you got a circle, well, it's more than that. It's because it's already moving through time. But if you also, right now it's moving on like the X and Y plane, and if you also move it in Z or Z, that's when you get spirals, right? So the foundation of the circle is the perfect foundation for spiral activity. But to be honest with you, a lot of people spend a lot of time visualizing spirals and whatnot. And I think that's really not important if you want to engage with Kundalini. What's important is you engage with it consciously, right? So rather, like, it's really funny if you're doing all this heavy breathing and trying to breathe into, I mean, I guess it works, you know. I mean, I use breathing to augment various meditational processes, but generally, I find engaging with Kundalini in particular just works if you just engage with it consciously, especially since Kundalini represents the life force energy of the whole of reality. Hence the white dot, Dave dolls, right? It's not you what, it's the life force of divinity, right? Which has to somehow be contemplated at a human level. As energy passes from the astral into the physical, like what are the forms it takes? It's almost, and like, how does the imagination work? And this is the other thing Skinner was saying, is the imagination is not important. I'm just like, I don't understand that. It's vitally important. Using the imagination with the Kundalini is the number one way of activating Kundalini. I mean, I guess the traditional way is just to pray to God for activation. But in my experience, if you work with Kundalini like it is the sensual life force of reality, you will not have to do any heavy breathing. It's like you're speaking its language, and it instantly activates, and bah. So the circle of light, the circle of energy. I mean, I guess you can extrapolate this into many different situations. I mean, I guess the saints all have circles above their head, right? Christ is a circle above his head. Is that just a magical circle? Is it the circle of the life force? And I think there's also a stage here, like there's like a, I mean, what Vegan Dolls was saying in the chat there about, ooh, what? That's a really important moment, because I think that happens to a lot of people, right? You're like, oh, but that is the field of purification, right? Why would anybody have a? I mean, I know why, because I've gone through this myself. You're like, this, right? But there's a stage where you're like, dude, this is right. If you take it more from a David Attenborough Darwinian sort of side of things, well, it's the the stuff of life, right? So I think that's that moment is an important moment to sort of mediate consciously. I think it's a powerful moment to meditate consciously. Because much like the tantric initiations where you're in a temple made of rotten corpses, or there's a cannibalistic aspect visually in a visualization, they create these kinds of reactions where you're like, ah. But that, I think that's the point, right? Is the point is to create this energy, to create an energy of fire, right? A fiery, visceral reaction, which you can accept as it is and walk away from it, right? And learn nothing. Or you can sit in the field and observe not just what the conscious substance of that object is, because it's an imaginary object. What is the conscious? Think about that. Think about the conscious reaction you had to to an imaginary object. I mean, it's actually really interesting. Imaginary objects creating visceral responses. It's actually a really powerful. It's actually a really powerful moment to contemplate. So we've got the circle going around our finger, and there's a whole bunch of different ways you can work with circles. Obviously, the other place you might have a circle is right here in the third eye, right? So you could imagine the third eye is the center point, emanation of a circle, and then visualize the cultivation of energy around the third eye. Now, the reason why it's important, because like you can visualize these fields of energy or these visceral emotions, and the very fact that it's an imaginary object really calls into question all kinds of things, because you can cultivate an imaginative object so that it's more attractive than the real world, right? You can visualize something, and you've probably done this with when you're in high school with some girl you liked or whatever, right? You're like, it's the one. But it's really just it's an imaginative construct, right? So you can work this thing, and there's a bunch of key places. Obviously, you can do this around each of the chakras, and you can. I think the best way to work with this kind of stuff is kind of like in an intuitive way, right? So intuitive. And so the way, like the nidra yoga way, which talks a lot less about circles and really just about identifying points, point, hand, wrist, awareness, right? In its own way, it's got a different cycle of awareness to it, right? Top of the finger, side of the finger, other side, top, underneath, in the palm. And then you can play with like the size of the points too. Oh, hold on a second. I've got a bit of I have a candle burning beside me. It got a little out of hand, you might say. Dude, this is like a, what? It's the Kundalini did it. Hold on a second. A bit of smoke here. There we go. That was a bit over the top. What was I talking about? Different points. You can move these points. And so the quality of points themselves can be very, see, what happens is the point of awareness, is it's extremely powerful. Now, it may not appear extremely powerful to you at first, but like if you visualize the point of awareness, like as, oh, here we go. Great comment. All emotions are surfaces for which spirits can tune to and manipulate or communicate with your harnessed energy. Yeah, I think that's about right. Right? Sure. I mean, I think if you've got, it depends, right? It can be, but if you're doing a magical circle kind of thing, I mean, really, there's a ritual of purification, and I think whenever you're doing this kind of stuff, it's very easy, especially if you're pulling in like sensual ideas into the structure, right? Which makes the structure very magnetic, right? But if you're doing that, you've got to bounce back and forth into sort of purification section, right? So you can make it really sensual, but then bounce back out and sort of wash divinity back into it, because you're right, it will happen that sort of sensual energy will send out a call to spirits, but it won't if you are, I mean, in a way, doing the whole thing of like the whole Buddhist aspect of saying, I'm doing this for the benefit of all beings and this kind of stuff. What's that called? I'm like really bad student with the Buddhist stuff, but the whole thing of making the conscious meditational activity, whatever it is, as for the benefit of all beings, which kind of goes against, I mean, that's kind of what makes it slightly different than magic, right? You can imagine like the Alistair Crowley type is that's for me, right? I'm doing this for me, which was another thing Stephen Skinner said too. He said he didn't rate Alistair Crowley. He did not rate Alistair Crowley as a magician, which I think is that's pretty fucking bold to say that, dude. Of course, he doesn't think that imagination has any impact, and he yeah. So if you're doing everything from a technical perspective, Alistair Crowley might not seem appealing. You see, what is the genius about Alistair Crowley is his use of language, because poetry is there's a sensuality to poetry. He was using the alliteration and the some other poetic words here, right? The onomatopoeia of the words as a way of echoing into the astral plane, right? So maybe Skinner, I haven't read enough Skinner to diss him, so right. So I'm basing my opinions on some small amount of stuff I heard him talking about. But I was stunned that he said he didn't know where magical circles, what they are. He doesn't believe imagination has any impact on magic, and he doesn't rate Alistair Crowley. I was like, wow, bold. And also it just makes me think like, dude, if you don't understand the impact of the imagination and magic, then are you doing magic, dude? Or not even magic, just are you doing, can you meditate? Right? Can you actually meditate actually, dude? So I don't know. It seems to me that you may be missing out on a lot of power, right? Hey, Junkhouse Dog, I don't know if you're still here, but I was talking about your book before you talked there, the Inner Fire book, And so my comment on the Inner Fire book was about how, you breathe into the, yeah. Well, the thing is that if you're breathing into the syllable and you're pulling the energy down, like you're breathing down like Eden Pingala and pushing it in, like this is what I was saying previously, you're pushing it, and then you push the energy up, and it's like this forceful, prescriptive way of working with energy. But I just think it's the wrong way of doing it. If you just allow briefly the wrong thoughts or the right thoughts, fiery thoughts into the chakra, it's way more powerful than breathing, dude. And what happens is instead of pushing it, you lure the energy, right? Because Kundalini is life force. You flirt with it. You flirt with Kundalini, right? And so you flirt with it. It's like you're on a first date. You're like getting to second base, and you tease the Kundalini. And again, you're doing this, you have to sort of move back and forth with prayer and doing this, right? But it responds. It responds in a way you will never get. I mean, I don't know. I mean, the whole breathing. I mean, like I was saying, I do use breathing from time to time, and I find the Nikong stuff, like breathing into the bone marrow, I find that really powerful. But yeah, that whole thing would just like, I don't even. How you explain it? It starts looking too sexy all of a sudden, just the way you're moving, but that's the way the consciousness is moving, right? You're just like, so if I'm doing this ring, the Shakti's ring, and it's a ring, but then you start like really, you're polishing the ring, right? You're polishing it. You're like tapping the ring, right? And it's just a piece of energy. But like what I was saying is, the more you can allow yourself to creatively interact with the ring, it gets promoted into the astral plane as the first projection. I love coming up with these things. It's the first projection it's the first conscious projection of the astral plane, right? And that becomes the core structure of the magical circle. But more importantly than that, it's like a teaching mnemonic. It's just a concept to teach on, right? And so if you can do it with a ring, then I think you get more abstract structures. So that Marie Lindstrom, what she does is she's doing this whole thing where she just focuses on like a feeling of joy, which is a more abstract structure, right? But you can preserve sexual energy is the key. High frequency energy. Yeah, I think it does have an impact, like the sexual energy stuff in terms of in some ways. I mean, I can pull this stuff up anyway, but yeah, it has an impact, and I'd be stupid just setting against it, because every book of every tradition says it makes an impact, right? So it makes an impact, and certainly, there's a bunch of things which are traditional. Fasting creates a massive impact on your ability to meditate, right? Very difficult to meditate if you've got a hangover, right? Sometimes it's really easy. Sometimes you'll be like, boom, you're like, I'm up in the astral plane instantly. Just like, what happened? So I guess it depends on the situation. But and I think the other thing there too is the the concept of purification of the energy, right? So if it's sexual energy, and like so Vegan Dolls, just before there was like, I was mentioning how the white dot comes down from the consorts having sex, and it comes down into the body, and she's like, what the fuck, dude? That's disgusting, right? Or whatever. But what I'm saying is that energy too, the disgust energy, is very is what it becomes you have to interrogate that, right? Yeah, dude, you know all this stuff, dude, right? I mean, it's like it's the thing is, these are not real objects. Well, they're, what's the word, imaginal. They're imaginal, but what happens is they have meaning. So one of the things I was saying is, if you think about the ring of Shakti, I was saying there's a lot of ways you can visualize this. So for example, if you're having sex with somebody, there's obviously a point of contact where the penetration, and that is more or less defined by a circle, right? So that could become one of the adornments of the ring of Shakti. Some people might think, well, why would you do that? That's not holy or whatever. I think that's every bit as holy as any other thought, right? More so, because what you've actually done is you're actually co-opting the life force into the visualization, right? And it's for sure there's lots of negative thought flows that will come from that, like, oh, I shouldn't do this or whatever. But those need to be interrogated. What it does is all those tertiary thoughts create more focus. It makes the object more magnetic, because the only thing that really matters is creating perfect focus. Because once you get perfect focus, you can pierce through everything. It's crazy. Not that I've done that for a while, to be honest with you. It's been a while since I pierced through consciousness. But well, you forget stuff. You think you haven't. I think about a week ago, I did, when I had that transmission from unintentional transmission from Marie Lindstrom. I had like a mega event, but yeah. Anyway, so I guess that was it, though. I mean, I was trying to go on here. I was talking to someone the other day about Shakti's ring and different ways of visualizing it, and I think the thing is like, I'm only hinting at a few things here, but I mean, you can obviously, based on your own mind, you can allow your mind to go places, right? And like for example, going around the pituitary gland, right? Which interestingly is the one at the front. You would think that was the pineal gland. The pineal gland's behind. So you get the pituitary, then you get the thalamus, and then the pineal gland's at the back of the thalamus, right? Around the thalamus, dude. Try that. Try drawing a ring of energy around the thalamus, dude. Holy shit, that's amazing, right? And then here's the thing: is obviously working with, like, Vegan Dolls was saying, she's a smart ass and was trying to tell me that she prefers squares to circles, which is funny. But another way you can do this, of course, is if you get used to, in a way, if you're moving your awareness around a ring, what you're really doing is you're sort of running energy through it, right? And so that's the same way I work with a Sanskrit symbol. So if I'm doing the first letter of the heart chakra, which is like a T with a sideways S on it, which is I don't know all the letter names. I know all the symbols, right? But what you can do is you can visualize that. And so this is one of the things I'll do, So rather than drawing a circle around my pineal gland, which is actually at the back, I might like start drawing out the first symbol of the heart chakra on it, right? And I'll run the energy. I'll create the conscious awareness on the Sanskrit, which is another way of keeping. It's another way of like purifying, or you can mix. It's almost like you're hybridizing different energies. You can take like the sexual energy and hybridize it with the Sanskrit, right? And then you're moving this energy around the Sanskrit, so it creates it's almost like it's a power source into the Sanskrit letters, right? There's some really cool. There's a really cool one. It's a line and a backwards M, a line down the backwards M, which is where's that one? That's like on the I forgot all the names. Manipura, right? On Manipura. Is that I can't remember the names. But you get but you can allow the energy, boom, boom, and then also around each petal, right? So if you think about what happens is the more detailed you become, like dude, you were talking, in your book, The Inner Fire. What I found really interesting about in that book was we were visualizing syllables in the chakras. But what was really cool about it is he or she, whoever it was, they were making the syllables really small, right? That's really cool. So it's almost like you can go big. You can go big for sure, right? But then if you just focus on these tiny little, and what that is, it's almost like it's almost saying that it's enough just to hint. The hint, in a way, the hint of the concept is more sensual to Shakti, right? Right? It's just like the touch, right? Touch of energy, but it's infinite energy, and so it attracts the touch, and so that energy can be perfumed or dyed with any kind of metaphor from the astral world, and sort of embed that into the concept. And that's what they've done with the syllables, right? Or with the white dots. And yeah, so yeah, it's interesting. And so I think the thing is talking about this stuff is really cool. One of the things that in some ways, one of the things I've been learning from watching Marie Lindstrom's videos, though, is that she's I'm a talker, so I tend to talk a lot about stuff, right? So because I find it interesting, like on an intellectual level. But and there's a possibility there's a transmission in that too, just from the chats. I know I was talking to Julian recently, and I just remembered, like, he sent me a video. Julian sent me a video the other day, and it was just him singing a song, but it was just like transmission of energy coming off the song, which is unbelievable, And I think he wants to do an interview. Actually, we'll probably do that this week on the channel. But I think part of this thing, like with Lindstrom, she's doing this thing where she's trying to pull people into a field. It's just pulling people into the field. She's not explaining it, right? Pulling into the field. Team and Julian. And I think that's, I think I want to be trying to do that more. It's something I've avoided, it's like I avoid going into the field on YouTube, right? So I think I need to start, I think I should do some meditation videos or something, right? Right? Vegan dolls. Imagine the white liquid coming down. Right? But you don't have to do that. The thing is, you could do something. I think it's like the Scientologists, right? They don't tell you about the aliens until you're well indoctrinated, right? So probably I'll do some meditation stuff and just be talking about breathing and the field of joy, right? Feel and cultivate those simple fields because they're really powerful. And the other simple fields are the Bardonian fields too, like the Kabbalistic fields of the letters, right? Which is very much like the Sanskrit stuff, but you cultivate that. So there's a great what's the one? It's the great that is the F. That's the F note. I'll have to do it here. So that's annoyingly in the Bardonian Kabbalah, the note of F is associated with the letter G. They couldn't have made a G, right? They had to make an F just to make it more confusing. F is associated with abundance, amongst other things. The abundance is like at the physical level. But of course, A is associated with the note G. La, do, re, re, G, right? Re. And what's interesting about that is A is the letter associated with creating space, right? It pushes space, creates space. So a lot of times, like in the manifestation groups, some of which have interesting things to say, it's almost like, well, you're not, nothing good will come into your life if there's no space for that, right? So what I'm saying is, if you sing G, what's cool about the Kabbalistic letters is you can, because they have musical annotations, you can work with them harmonically, right? So you might evoke the field of A, which is Tibetan too. It's the same colors as like the sky blue, right? And the sky blue is really the A is the big one in Vajrayana. There are some other letters they use, but generally it's the letter A, because it's all about creating the enlightenment space, right? You create the space and then you drop into the G, right? Which has visualizations associated with it too, right? But you could do this. D. What is D again? D is, I think it's a sexual energy thing, the D one. Yeah. Yeah, you're looking like that. You're going to turn into Dan Bilzerian if you do those three notes, right? It'll be like space, money, girls. I mean, really, that's the three notes you need, guys. G, A, and D, right? Although it wouldn't be D, it would be C, because it's one note down. That's G. Wait, where am I? F, G. I guess it would be B. I don't even know what it is anymore. C. Yeah, it's because it's all like offset. It's funny, my son's class at school, he's learning guitar, right? But he's left-handed. And he's like, the teacher was like, gave him the chord charts. And he's like, well, you're just going to have to like mirror them in your mind and play them. He's like, what? Because the chord charts don't work if you've got a left-handed guitar. We don't have a left-handed guitar, but he was trying to do it. So I restrung my guitar to left-handed so he can like do it. And he's learning this Nirvana song. And I put the chords in the right things and it all worked. But similarly, if you're trying to do these letters with the wrong context, you're not going to be playing Nirvana here, dude. You're going to be Nirvana. Whoa, you're not going to Nirvana, right? You'll be doing some other song, which isn't quite as spectacular, if you will. Anyway, yeah, I think I'm done. Yeah. Yeah, sorry I don't come on much. I've been really busy and life is kind of like extremely challenging at the moment. Extremely challenging. I fell through the deck last week. The deck broke underneath me. I thought I broke my leg. I couldn't walk for 2 days. Seemed to have miraculously recovered, thank God. But things are really challenging at the moment. But well, fingers crossed. We'll have to do some emanations of F and G, I suppose, to make everything all right. And yeah, peace out, you guys. Thanks for dropping by. I'll try not to be a stranger. Peace.